Good morning. I want to start with something that might catch you off guard. For decades, the standard advice for people over 75 has been to slow down, rest more, and quietly accept whatever decline comes with the years. But new findings from longevity researchers tell a very different story. The seniors who stay strong, sharp, and independent well into their 80s aren't doing anything exotic. They're not taking some secret supplement or following an expensive program. They're practicing a small set of daily habits that most people their age have unknowingly let go of. I'm Dr. David Aid, and for years I've worked closely with patients in their 70s, 80s, and beyond. What I notice in clinic lines up almost exactly with what the data shows. The people who hold on to their independence the longest share a specific, repeatable pattern of behavior. Today I want to walk you through 6 of those habits, in order of impact, and I'll tell you right now. The one at the very top of the list is rarely discussed in a typical doctor's visit, and it has almost nothing to do with diet or exercise in the way you'd expect. Stay with me to the end, because that last one might genuinely change how you think about the rest of your life. Let me give you some context for why I trust this list. Researchers at a major longevity center followed more than 4,000 adults between 70 and 90 years old for over a decade. The people in that study who consistently kept up just 4 or more of the habits we're about to cover were over 60% less likely to experience what's called accelerated functional decline, basically the kind of rapid loss of independence that pushes people into assisted living long before it's necessary. 60% is not a rounding error. That's the difference between staying in your own home, driving your own car, and living life on your own schedule versus losing that control years earlier than you might have to. Before we get into the habits themselves, I'd love to know where you're starting from. Drop your age in the comments and tell me which of these 6 you think you're already doing well. I read through the comments on this channel regularly, and I genuinely want to hear from you. This isn't a one-way conversation, it's a community, and your experience matters just as much as the research does. Now let's get into it, counting down from number 6 to number 1. Number 6. Drinking water on purpose, not just whenever you happen to remember. Here's the mistake I see constantly. People assume hydration works the same way at 78 as it did at 48. It doesn't. As we move past 70, kidney filtering efficiency declines substantially, and at the same time, the thirst signal, the internal alarm that tells you to drink, becomes noticeably weaker. That combination means a person can be meaningfully dehydrated and feel completely fine. No thirst, no obvious warning sign, nothing that says drink water until the effects are already showing up elsewhere. Picture your bloodstream as a delivery network for your whole body, carrying oxygen, nutrients, even hormones to every organ and muscle. When that network runs low on fluid, deliveries slow down. Things that should arrive on time start arriving late, or not at all. That's what chronic low-grade dehydration does inside an aging body, quietly, day after day, without ever announcing itself. A study following 3,500 adults over 70 found that the people who kept their daily fluid intake consistently above roughly half a gallon had meaningfully fewer urinary tract infections, a noticeably lower rate of falls, because dehydration genuinely affects balance and reaction time, and stronger performance on short-term memory testing. That last point matters more than people realize. The brain is mostly water, and even a small drop in hydration shows up as measurable mental fog at any age. After 75, the effect is amplified because the brain is already working harder just to maintain its baseline functioning. Here's what I tell my patients who want to do this properly. Don't just sip throughout the day and hope it adds up. Drink a full glass first thing in the morning, before coffee, before breakfast, before anything else, because you lose fluid overnight just through breathing, and after 75, that overnight loss tends to be noticeably higher than it was in your 50s and 60s. Add a glass with each meal, and one more in the mid-afternoon, which tends to be when energy and focus dip the hardest. One detail most people miss. Pair that morning glass of water with a small pinch of good quality salt, or an electrolyte tablet, not table salt poured on heavily, just a pinch. As we age, the kidneys have a harder time holding on to sodium, and without enough of it, water can pass through the body without being properly absorbed where it's actually needed, inside your cells. I had a patient, Eleanor, 82, from Tucson. She came in describing afternoon brain fog, lightheadedness when she stood up too quickly, and what she called a cotton wool feeling in her thinking. She wasn't dramatically dehydrated by any obvious measure. She was just chronically, mildly underhydrated day after day. We made one change: timed, strategic hydration with that small electrolyte addition in the morning. 6 weeks later, she told me it felt like someone had wiped the fog off a window in her mind. Her balance improved. Her afternoons stopped feeling like a write-off. One habit, real results. Before we move to habit 5, if this is useful to you, take 1 second and hit subscribe. And if there's someone in your life between 70 and 90 who would benefit from hearing this, send them the video. This channel exists for exactly that reason, to give people the kind of evidence-based information that often doesn't fit into a 15-minute appointment. Number 5, resistance-based movement, at least twice a week. I want to clear up a common misunderstanding here. When I talk about resistance movement, I'm not talking about a gym membership or heavy barbells. I mean any movement where your muscles are working against some kind of force: a resistance band, a light set of dumbbells, wall push-ups, even carrying your own groceries with intention instead of avoiding the bags altogether. The reason this matters so much past 75 comes down to something researchers call anabolic resistance. In plain terms, aging muscle becomes less responsive to the normal signals, protein, movement, that tell it to maintain itself. It's not that your muscles have given up. They simply need a stronger, more deliberate signal to respond the way they used to with much less effort. If that signal doesn't show up consistently, the body slides into sarcopenia, the gradual loss of muscle mass and strength. Research out of a major medical center has linked this kind of muscle loss to a sharply higher risk of falling, a much higher chance of losing the ability to manage basic daily tasks within 5 years, and a shortened lifespan overall. Here's the encouraging part. A university-led study followed adults between 75 and 85 who started twice-weekly resistance training. After just 10 weeks, not years, weeks, participants showed substantial gains in leg strength, meaningful improvements in balance, and something researchers didn't expect: a measurable improvement in insulin sensitivity, which has ripple effects on energy levels, inflammation, and even cognitive function. Your muscles contain mitochondria, the cellular structures that produce energy, and these actually regenerate more efficiently when resistance training is part of the routine. You're not just maintaining muscle, you're rebuilding the energy system that powers your entire body. In practice, this means 2 to 3 short sessions a week, 20 to 30 minutes each, focused on the big muscle groups: legs, hips, back. Resistance bands work especially well here because they build strength progressively without stressing the joints the way heavier equipment can. One detail that makes a real difference: try to eat 25 to 30 grams of protein within about half an hour of finishing your session. After 75, the window during which muscles most efficiently absorb protein for repair is shorter than it used to be. Timing isn't a minor detail at this stage. It's part of the prescription. Number 4, a consistent, purposeful sleep schedule. This one goes well beyond simply going to bed early. After 75, your circadian rhythm, your internal 24-hour clock, starts to weaken and drift. Melatonin production drops substantially compared to where it was decades earlier, and slow-wave sleep, the deep, physically restorative stage, shrinks dramatically from where it was in your 30s. That deep sleep stage is when human growth hormone is released, and that hormone drives cellular repair, immune function, and muscle maintenance. Here's the part that surprises people. Poor sleep after 75 isn't just about feeling tired the next day. Research out of a major American university found that older adults with disrupted sleep patterns showed a notably higher accumulation of amyloid plaques in the brain, the same plaques associated with Alzheimer's disease. The people who handle this well share a pattern. They go to bed within roughly the same 30-minute window every single night. They wake at the same time every morning, weekends included. They keep the bedroom cool, somewhere around the mid-60s in Fahrenheit, because temperature regulation during sleep becomes less efficient with age, and a cooler room genuinely supports the deep sleep your brain needs. And they avoid screens for the hour before bed, not purely because of blue light, but because mental stimulation keeps the thinking part of the brain active in a way that measurably delays falling asleep. One addition that helps enormously: 10 minutes of slow, deliberate breathing before bed. This activates the body's rest and repair nervous system response, lowers nighttime stress hormone levels, and makes it noticeably easier to reach and stay in deep sleep. Number 3, eating protein in a deliberate, spread-out pattern through the day. This is where I see one of the most damaging myths in senior nutrition, and it genuinely worries me as a physician. Somewhere along the way, the idea took hold that older adults need less protein. The truth is closer to the opposite. Because of that anabolic resistance I mentioned earlier, the body after 75 actually needs noticeably more protein per pound of body weight than a healthy adult in their 30s needs to maintain the same amount of muscle. And yet, in practice, I see the reverse. Appetite naturally decreases with age, and easy carbohydrate-heavy foods often replace protein simply because they're easier to prepare. A large nutrition study involving adults aged 70 to 85 found that those eating roughly 1.2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight, spread across 3 or more meals a day, kept significantly more muscle mass, were hospitalized far less often for fall-related injuries, and had a stronger immune response to common infections. Think of protein as the raw material your body uses for overnight repair. Every night, old, damaged tissue gets broken down and rebuilt. Without enough raw material, that rebuilding job is left half-finished. Do that night after night for months, and the gap becomes significant. Practically, aim for 25 to 35 grams of protein at each main meal, roughly 4 to 5 ounces of chicken, fish, eggs, Greek yogurt, or legumes. Spreading it across the day matters because aging muscle can only put a limited amount of protein, somewhere around 35 to 40 grams, to use for repair in a single sitting. Beyond that, the extra just gets burned for energy instead of rebuilding tissue. Spacing it out makes every gram count. I worked with a patient, Walter, 77, from Asheville. His daughter had noticed he'd dropped close to 18 pounds, which a previous provider had waved off as normal age-related weight loss. It wasn't. He was losing muscle, not fat, and his grip strength, a strong predictor of long-term health in older adults, had fallen into the lowest range for his age group. We rebuilt his meals around deliberate protein. 12 weeks later, he'd regained 11 pounds of lean mass, his grip strength had climbed back into a healthy range, and he told me, with real pride, that he'd carried his own groceries in from the car for the first time in 2 years. One small addition that helps. Pair protein-rich meals with a bit of vitamin C, an orange, some bell pepper, a splash of lemon juice because vitamin C supports collagen production, which works alongside dietary protein to maintain not just muscle, but joint cartilage and skin integrity as well. Number 2, daily intentional social connection. I told you earlier that one of the top 2 habits would surprise you, and this is usually the one. It sounds soft, almost too emotional to belong on a medical list. But the research behind it is some of the most consistent and well-replicated work in the entire field of aging science. A large analysis covering hundreds of thousands of adults over multiple decades found that chronic social isolation carries a mortality risk comparable to smoking roughly 15 cigarettes a day. I'll say that again because it deserves to land. Being consistently isolated socially is, statistically, about as harmful to your lifespan as a serious smoking habit. For adults past 75 specifically, researchers studying aging have found that loneliness meaningfully speeds up cognitive decline, substantially raises dementia risk, and drives up inflammatory markers in the blood that go on to damage the heart, the immune system, and neural connections throughout the brain. Here's the biology behind it. Real social interaction, not passive screen time, not sitting quietly in a room while a television plays, triggers the release of oxytocin, which in turn lowers cortisol, reduces inflammation, and activates the parts of the brain responsible for decision-making and memory. Think of your social brain like a muscle. The same neural pathways that fire during genuine conversation, shared laughter, friendly disagreement, are the pathways that keep your memory and sense of self intact. When those pathways go quiet for weeks at a stretch, the brain starts pruning them away. And past 75, the brain's natural ability to rebuild those connections is already reduced, which makes restoring them considerably harder than preventing the loss in the first place. The actual prescription is simple, but it has to be intentional. Aim for at least one genuinely engaged social interaction every day. A phone call counts as long as you're actively present in it. A faith community, a regular walking partner, a standing lunch with a neighbor all count. What doesn't count, neurologically speaking, is passive presence, being in the same room as someone without actually engaging. The benefit comes from active participation, responding, laughing, disagreeing, Sharing. I think of Helen, 84, from Savannah. After losing her husband of over 50 years, she withdrew almost entirely from social life. Her daughter brought her in about 8 months later, and her cognitive testing had genuinely declined in that window. We didn't touch her medications. Instead, we built her a social structure, a weekly book club, a daily 20-minute call rotating between friends and family, and a twice-weekly volunteer shift at the local library. 8 months after that, her scores had returned close to her baseline. Her inflammation markers had come down, and her daughter told me she finally felt like she had her mother back. One detail worth adding: pair social time with light physical movement when you can, a walk with a friend, a gentle group exercise class, gardening alongside a neighbor. Combining the two produces a noticeably stronger effect on a brain growth compound called BDNF than either one does on its own. BDNF essentially feeds the growth of healthy brain cells, and you want as much of that as you can reasonably get. And now, number one. Fewer than roughly 1 in 8 adults over 75 maintain this habit consistently, and researchers studying aging have called it one of the most underused tools available for protecting independence later in life, with no prescription required. Number one, daily purposeful cognitive challenge. I don't mean crossword puzzles and I don't mean passive reading, though both have some value. I'm talking about something more demanding, actually learning something new, a skill, a language, an instrument, a creative pursuit you've never tried, something that puts your brain into a state of productive struggle. Here's why this tops the list. Past 75, the brain naturally starts favoring familiar, well-worn neural pathways. It gets extremely efficient at things it already knows how to do, and increasingly reluctant to build anything new. That's not a flaw. It's the brain conserving energy. But that same preference for the familiar is exactly what drains what's called cognitive reserve, the brain's buffer against age-related structural change. Think of cognitive reserve like extra memory in a computer. The more of it you have, the more wear and tear your brain can absorb before you start noticing symptoms. A long-running study out of a major research university followed over 1,000 adults from their 70s into their late 80s. The people who spent at least 30 minutes a day on genuinely novel, challenging mental activity showed a substantially slower rate of brain shrinkage on imaging, held on to stronger processing speed and memory, and were considerably less likely to receive a dementia diagnosis over the following decade. A separate long-term study found that seniors who described their daily lives as intellectually engaging performed on cognitive testing roughly like adults a full decade younger. The underlying mechanism is neuroplasticity, your brain's ability to form new connections. It does decline with age, but it never fully disappears. Even into your 80s, the brain retains real capacity for meaningful change, but only when it's given a strong enough reason to change. Novel learning is that reason. Learning a new language, for instance, activates several different brain regions at once and has been associated with meaningfully delaying the onset of dementia. Learning an instrument combines fine motor control, hearing, memory, and emotion in a way almost nothing else does. Even learning to cook an unfamiliar cuisine counts because it demands reading, sequencing, and hands-on skill all at once. In practice, pick one genuinely new skill every 3 or 4 months and spend 20 to 30 minutes a day actively working at it. The key word is actively. Watching someone else play piano in a video isn't learning piano. Sitting down with the instrument and fumbling through a chord progression is. That struggle is the point. It's the mental equivalent of resistance training. The discomfort is doing the work. I think of Frank, 79, from Sacramento, a retired civil engineer who spent his first few years of retirement, in his own words, not challenging his mind much at all. He came to see me after noticing he was having trouble recalling names and following longer conversations. His brain imaging looked age-appropriate, nothing alarming, but his cognitive reserve scores were lower than I'd have liked. I gave him one instruction: pick something he'd always wanted to try, and do it daily. He chose watercolor painting, something he'd never attempted in his life. He was genuinely bad at it at first, by his own admission. 18 months later, he'd completed over 20 paintings, joined a local art group, which incidentally took care of habit number 2 as well, and his follow-up testing showed improvement, not just maintenance in several measured areas. Improvement at 79. One last detail: pair your daily learning with some omega-3 intake, specifically DHA, found in fatty fish like salmon and sardines, or in a quality fish oil supplement. DHA forms a large part of the structural fat in brain cell membranes, and research suggests people with higher DHA levels respond more strongly to cognitive training. In other words, it helps your brain make better use of the learning you're putting in. All the studies referenced throughout this video are listed in the description below, and I genuinely encourage you to look through them and bring them up with your own doctor. Let me leave you with this. I've sat across from enough patients in their 70s and 80s to know that this stage of life gets treated far too often as a countdown rather than a continuation. It isn't one. What the research consistently shows is that the body and the mind, even at 75, 80, 85, retain a genuine, stubborn capacity to adapt and strengthen, not despite age, but alongside it. The 6 habits we covered today, deliberate hydration, resistance movement, consistent sleep, spread out protein intake, daily social connection, and purposeful cognitive challenge, aren't about turning back the clock. They're about making full use of the time that's still there. Carrying your own groceries, remembering your grandchildren's names without writing them down, driving yourself to your own appointments. That's what independence actually looks like, and it's never too late to start building toward it. If you found this useful, take a moment to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment letting me know which of these 6 habits you're strongest in already and which one you're going to work on next. I read through these regularly, and if you know someone between 70 and 90 who would benefit from this, please share it with them today. Take care of yourself. You're worth the effort.